Wow, such a great turnout. Hi everyone, thank you for coming for the first of the Zurich Art Weekend Art and Science talks. There are 2 more tomorrow. I'm Georgia from Zurich Art Weekend, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to the first talk, What's Next for Art and AI. Ahead of introducing the talk, organised in partnership with ArtReview, I'd like to thank Amy and Carsten for the organisation and the continued partnership. Alongside our other partners, Julius Baer, the Stadt Zurich, and Luma Westbau, where we're in the building today. I'd like to introduce our moderator, JJ Charlesworth, who is a writer, art critic, and editor of ArtReview. Alongside his written reviews, articles, and commentaries for ArtReview, he's written for publications, including Time Out London, The Daily Telegraph, Art Agenda, ArtNet News, and CNN Style. This year, he published a new book, Criticism, Art and Theory in 1970s Britain, the Critical War. I leave you with JJ and enjoy the discussion.
Thank you, Georgia. Can you hear me? Are we there? We're there. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for Zurich Art Weekend for hosting us. And it's great to see so many people worried about the impending dominance of artificial intelligence. No, I'm joking. So I'm going to introduce a few of the ideas that we're going to talk about, and then our speakers. So after a decade of pioneering artists experimenting with the possibilities and potentials of artificial intelligence, AI has recently become a major issue, not just for artists and creative types, but everybody else too. For a decade now, artists have been experimenting with developments in AI, but with the arrivals of systems like ChatGPT, DALL-E, and others, the last couple of years have seen intense discussions about the impact of AI on many artistic disciplines and cultural industries, as big tech has stepped up and stepped into the field in a big way. The last year has seen a shift in the discussion around AI, as big tech has brought AI assistants, AI chat engines, AI art makers in particular to the market, with many wondering if AI is set to make many human jobs redundant, not least in the creative industries. You think about the recent the Hollywood writers and actors strikes last year, the recent intervention from Hollywood star Scarlett Johansson, who denounced Sam Altman's OpenAI for having appropriated her voice for their synthetic AI voice, vocalized engine, after she had actually refused to provide her voice for this purpose. So this raises some big issues about questions such as copyright and intellectual property, but the rapid development of AI also challenges, I think, our assumptions about the special nature of human creativity, and maybe even human agency itself, which are big, philosophical, heavy, and often quite scary issues. An open letter last year, for example, signed by Elon Musk and many other luminaries in the tech industry, called for a pause on AI developments to assess what the possible negative consequences might be. It quotes, "Advanced AI could represent a profound change in the history of life on Earth," it said, scarily. So it's a bit of an anxious debate, which I find tends to see the worst in the potentials of technology and innovation. But more positively, I think artists working with emerging AI have been creatively questioning the positive possibilities of these technologies and using it to try out new ways of thinking about artwork that reveals things to us in ways in which earlier artworks did not or could not. So how might artists positively engage with the AI as it becomes an increasingly significant part of contemporary culture? What should art and artists, rather than the overlords in big tech, do with it? And what can that art do for us? And if we think that of the art world as a different kind of space from corporate and mainstream culture, how should our art institutions engage with AI and the artists who work with it? My technology switches off before I finished. Here we go, sorry. And how will our art museums engage with these new possibilities? It's an important point. When what an artwork can do with an audience it changes, when an artwork can become active, dynamic, and even in some way intelligent, although I put a big quotes around that. I'm not sure. Anyway, so to discuss these and other questions, I have two esteemed speakers, one artist and one curator. Directly to my right here is Refik Anadol, born in Istanbul and based in Los Angeles. He's a leading media artist and pioneer in machine intelligence aesthetics. His studio focuses on innovative data narratives and immersive environments. Anadol's work, often site-specific, uses data to create dynamic, visually striking experiences. You'll have probably seen images of Refik's amazing New York MoMA work, unsupervised, that ran all through 2023 to great acclaim. And if you're going to Basel next week, he's presenting a major new work in the Untitled section at Art Basel. Next to him is Alistair Hudson, who is a curator and museum director with a broad-ranging international experience. He's the Scientific Artistic Chairman. It's one of my favorite titles for any person in a position in a museum. He's the Scientific Artistic Chairman of the ZKM, the Centre for Art and Media in Karlsruhe. And before that was the director of Manchester and Whitworth Galleries in the UK, and before that, MIMA in Middlesbrough in England. He combines contemporary curatorial expertise with a profound knowledge of the relationship between art, technology, and society. He's always a very interesting person to talk and listen to, because he's also an enthusiastic advocate for what he calls the useful museum. So please welcome our guests. And after that lengthy preamble, I'm going to hand it over to Refik straight away to give us your first thoughts on all those kind of terrible things I've said and all the possibly good things I've suggested might be worth paying attention to.
Yes, so hello everyone. So great to be here in Switzerland and first Zurich and then hopefully Basel. First of all, I'm super honored to be here because, thanks to Alistair, and the history of ZKM here is very important for my journey. Just to give maybe 2008, I was in Istanbul studying visual communication design, and Ben Azarekse and Peter Weibel was advising our department. And as an undergrad in my 4th years, I introduced a software called the VVVV, 4V, and it's free and you can download. And in that class, I coined the term data painting. And it was just like now 16 years of imagination, the idea of like information in life or data is not just numbers. They can be a form of memory. And that memory can take any shape, any form, and any color. And I thought that if we liberate our imagination from the Newtonian constraints of imagination, perhaps there's a world where data can survive and create things that maybe beyond our realistic constraints. So I think AI is exactly, there, right, that question. I found it extremely happy. I'm happy, as a human, I am, protecting my childish dreams as an 8 years old watching Blade Runner. You can imagine seeing a dystopic, like really dark movie. But as a child, I tried to see the hope, joy, and inspiration. And I never left that feeling in my life. And I think the life is so complicated. Life can introduce us problems, conflicts, and wars and separations. But what I found much challenging is preserving that feeling in life and how to maintain just a practice around it. So where AI come to my life was 8 years old when I started working in my bedroom that my mom gifted a Commodore computer. And I guess the nerding imagination with me, she never stopped. And that was when I started questioning why my bedroom was like the same ceiling, the same floor, the same windows. Why not, they changed, like the games, like the imagination and simulations. So now what I felt that AI is exactly helping people myself, or artists like myself, or creators like myself, or people who have been thinking, going beyond reality question. This can be positive, this can be dark, this can be negative, this can be all the way everywhere and anything and everything. So I think what makes us uncomfortable is the idea of anything and everything. So AI is introducing us using our past as an input, experience something now, and to imagine the future. So we invent a time machine, we just don't put a name yet. And also I think what happens here, like we were discussing, the life we left behind in the internet, which is the input for AI, which is the last couple of decades, of course, I don't believe it can be the ultimate source of intelligence for humanity. We are here for thousands of years, and there's no way that this thing that can represent humanity in general, of course. But what I felt so much inspired is the idea of a mirror. So AI is just a simple form of mirror. And it's so simple and so strong that it reflects back who we are. I think the problem is not about AI. The problem is about who we are. So now, if you think about this, as an artist, I can't draw properly, but I know how to compute geometries, how to compute pixel, voxel, all that type of like digital imagination, right? There's an era like myself who artists like enjoy the idea of imagining with algorithms, data, and now AI. So I think if we take the camera from our perspective, like the situation with Scarlett Johansson's voice, for example, it's absolutely weird because I think artists are questioning what is beyond reality, what is beyond, like, what is dream and hallucinations and fantasies. There are places that is beyond what we have. So what I am feeling is in the hands of artists, these technologies have a different context and discourse. When they become a product service, that's what we are discussing in a different way. And I also believe artists are the alarm mechanisms of humanity. Of course, we are trying to tell things sometimes early, sometimes later. But I think that with AI, it's so powerful that we finally have intelligence or mimicking intelligence, mimicking reasoning, and this never happened in the humanity. But I also think that as an artist, I born in the age of, I witnessed the birth of internet, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, AI, quantum computation. I mean, of course, as a generation, we all reflect back to humanity with what we witnessed. So I feel like these are all very natural things happening, and the challenge is how to live in the age of anything and everything. So that part, long answer, probably.
No, it's actually, it's very concise, but I want to ask, before I move, ask Alistair to come in, I just want to ask you to tease out a little bit by example,
yes,
how that relationship between you and the technology, the tool, is defined with regards to the data, because your work is primarily you're known to with regards you're known for someone who deals with data, which is knowledge or information, not necessarily knowledge, but using very large bodies of data, which of course is the one thing that humans find hard to handle. Find a way to allow a machine to interpret it in a way which is counterintuitive, not conventional. So maybe talk us through one of your pieces, just so that, for example, the MoMA piece, because that's a very interesting one also in terms of the relationship to the museum, and the museum is a place where knowledge of a certain sort is kept, where a history of a certain sort is kept. So maybe that would be something to kind of ask you just to quickly summarize.
Very happy. Maybe the unsupervised MoMA. Maybe we can. So this is the image of our artwork closed last November at MoMA. Our curators Michel Coe and Paolo Antonelli. And my mentor, Casey Rias, who invented processing, which is a very important software, allowed many creators to learn how to, creatively code the machine to create things. So Casey is my mentor and teacher who also teach me how to code, and he was also part of the very early, during the pandemic when the museum was closed, our curators challenged what happens if the museum doesn't sleep, and what happens if when the museum is closed, the archive doesn't sleep. And that was a very provocative, incredible start point. And by the way, MoMA's archive was already on GitHub, 2016. So the museum had a vision that one day their archive can be used for human imagination. So the start point was at pandemic, in the most hopeless time of art making, and an incredible Zoom call with the idea of 138,000 artworks in the museum. They were ready for speculating a new kind of an imagination. Just for a brief explanation, 2016 February, I was the first artist in resident at Google's AMI program. By the way, 2016-15 was the year artists like myself, Memo Akten, Mario Klingemann, and Harun Eselen, this group of artists, we have been working with the GAN algorithms. So this algorithm is very different than large language models because they are designed from scratch, that are not contaminated by randomness of other things, and you have a much more control in an unsupervised thinking, which is the opposite of what's happening right now with the ChatGPT, Gemini, and all that giant AI models are not necessarily the same mindset. Our challenge was what happens if we train this AI. Not necessarily worried with the idea of photography, videography, painting, and sculpture, all our human intellect and categories. What happens if we don't think about that way, and this AI can learn from scratch everything in that archive? That was a very inspiring start point. And what we tried almost 1 year, by the way, to be sure this AI never, ever shows something real in the archive. So when I say that, this 1 year of atelier in the studio, like training these models, by the way, many of them are most likely collapses. So when an AI model collapses, most likely parameters are somehow not right, or the data is not big enough, and there's so many possibilities when you are training AI models. To me, art making, or pigment making, or brush making, whatever we call it, starts in that first moment of imagination and the 1 year of thinking. Once it's done, we challenge ourselves. What happens if this work also doesn't repeat itself? Because when AI learns this information, it stores in 1024 dimension, which is an incredible possibility space. And additionally, the question was, what happens if the artwork can see, hear, and feel the weather? So we put a camera and a microphone and a weather station, and all that information influenced into the core of the AI model, and it never repeats itself. We had 2 supercomputers. One was computing the AI's possible dreams or hallucinations, and the other was artistic interpretation. In that case, you can think 50% AI, 50% human, and they were communicating and letting AI dream. So we received close to 3 million people last year, and the average viewing experience was 38 minutes. So it was a fascinating journey, and what we also tried is, why exactly is happening in the mind of the audience? Because some people say, oh, it's meditative, people are like nothing. And then what we learned, actually, 36 people, by the way, brain scans, brain signals, and basically by using a biosensing device, by heartbeat, skin conduction, and body temperature, we just checked, can we objectively think about this? And the paper is coming, by the way, in 2 weeks, thanks to our Professor Adam Gesley from UCSF, Rosalind Picard from MIT, and the Neurotrix team. Apparently, this type of work has created a flow state, a state that is most likely when we create, imagine, or a place where we felt productive. So that was a very interesting finding than we ever think about. So very grateful that, and lastly, piece went to the collection, which is a very positive signal for people like myself practicing in the field.
Thank you, Refik. Alistair, I don't want you to come back on any of that, but do if you feel there's points of entry for you. But it was important for me to get not an artist, but someone who's dealing with making choices about what the museum is going to do, and especially given that you have a very clear idea about the fact that the museum needs to do different things from now on. How have you, especially at ZKM, started to think about where AI should be for you, and where and in the work that you present or support or platform? I mean, what are the positive things that you've seen happen that you want to take further and support in the work that you have seen? Because as Refik's saying, it's not so long that these things were available for artists, and artists are terrible magpies and tinkerers, right? They will take anything. It doesn't matter if it's a porta-pack or the cine camera or the photographic plate, in history, or the internet, right? Artists will grab anything and try all kinds of things, and often they will reveal things that they did not intend. They will reveal things that people did not expect about the technologies that they encounter. So what has inspired you in what you've seen, particularly in the last few years, and where do you want it to? What do you want to do to kind of assist it, support it, maybe direct it? I don't know, but
yeah, I mean,
engage with it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and as Refik has pointed out, ZKM has a special remit, in a way, which is quite unique, which is that it's not necessarily a museum, although it has museum facets to it, but it's kind of the idea was an electronic digital Bauhaus. So it's about education, development, learning, production. It's a generative institution, in a way. It's a kind of AI in itself. But the point is, for me as well, that I always want kind of our cultural institutions to be operative in the world that they're working in and contributing. So for me, the main thing with somewhere like ZKM is we have to be the place where we convene people and people learn the technology. Because a lot of the kind of fear and it's like comical fear that you get. I mean, I think Elon Musk's comments are slightly, because he's brought up on Flash Gordon and space comics, he wants to maintain that narrative anyway. Or I also quite like it in the Mission Impossible films where they go, got to get the AI. There's a car chase to get the AI, which is in a little ball somehow and will destroy the world if it's opened. So it's really to kind of recalibrate our understanding of what these tools are, and they are tools essentially. And what we do with these tools is the creative human process, going beyond that. So for me, the primary thing at the moment, because this is really new technology, this is super new. This is like the early days of the Industrial Revolution with steam engines. We're a long way from where this is going to go, which again I find very exciting. So really, I think the job of the institution is to excite people and to allow them to learn through doing. And this is really important as well, that we have to have this as a place where people come and they experience and they actually use these technologies as well, or learn to use them, so that we understand what it is. And then when we understand it, we're not scared of it and we know how to do things with it. At the moment, one of the big problems is a lot of the technology is in the hands of big tech. And again, this is a kind of, again, another fair situation. And you have, like the open source community, the old school hackers and so on as well. Those communities have traditionally been separate. Mm-hmm. And I'm quite interested in now bringing those worlds together with our big public institutions like ZChem or universities, and to really say, how can we bring these agendas together? Because actually, when you start to talk to technologists in the industry, they realize that a lot of them say to me, well, I've got a bunch of nerds who don't get out very much. And they need to have this cultural experience of how tools are used and assimilated into common cultural life in order to get the best use out of them. So I think there's a mutual will at this moment, which I think is rather positive, which is about how artists and also how non-artists, because what's really good that I'm seeing now is people want to come, for example, to ZChem and with our current AI show, coming to play and coming to find out what's going on and what it means, and starting to learn how to use these tools and getting excited, even if it's just doing a mid-journey workshop or something like that. There's a kind of thrill to it, because also you can be creative. Like you say, the tradition was, I can draw or I can't draw, I can't be an artist, but now this technology is liberating people to be creative in an assisted way, rather than a way that they're having their brains taken over. And I think the future for me is, for institutions, is really to set the agenda about how we create a common shared cultural space to develop what kind of culture we want to live in and how technology forms that. And in a way, I think that's also a threshold we're on at the moment as well, that we used to look at the development of technology in terms of linearity, that we go from non-technology to intermediate technology to advanced technology as a line. But everything is changing so fast now, evolving so fast, that we're not only talking about like a post-digital future with AI and quantum computing, but also now biocomputing, wetware computing, the synthesis of nature and technology, which before was never really a possibility, but now it is. Mm-hmm. So in a way, that linear line now, for me, needs to loop back, so that in a way we have advanced technology working with non-technology or nature to really shape a kind of complete ecosystem. And you see it even now, with the fear around AI, but if you look at the actual practical application of it, we wouldn't have, for example, have created at speed the vaccines for corona without AI. Yep. That wouldn't have happened. So there's enormous positive benefits about how we use this tool and to develop it together. And I think that's actually rather positive.
Refik, do you want to come back on?
100% agree, because of a couple of weeks ago, right, the DeepMind team, yes, there's big tech, yes, hundreds of thousands of GPUs are required right now. And as we all know that artists, so the tool itself, when the tool itself is breakthrough, I think the possibility of artists to make a breakthrough goes lower and lower and lower. Mm-hmm. So we know that tools are incredible introduction to the imagination with AI, but doesn't mean for artists to create a breakthrough. And one of the reasons I think that the gap between an artist takes X million images or text or sound or whatever and make a custom AI model is not that easy. And I think right now one big problem and challenge I see from a very creative perspective is how can we be sure that artists are not necessarily only using existing ones, but having access to the things that are not exist yet. As I mentioned, you mentioned the breaking, hacking. We just like always, I think generally many artists, as far as I met and learned, we generally don't use the things as they are designed, and things generally like broken or not used like that, or like in the MoMA example.
Good way to learn, though.
Absolutely,
Like
and
misuse,
then reverse engineer the tool and see what is there and not there, and all that stuff. So, but for AI, it's really very luxury, because how to train a custom AI model by using millions of words, millions of images, that's not that easy. And I think here, what I hope that we can find a solution, like you mentioned with the institutions, where are the clusters of computation that artists can compute the imagination? Where are those locations that are not necessarily service software as a service model, but imagination itself is the core idea to let AI learn from the creator's imagination. And that's a beautiful challenge.
Do you see that there's a space? I mean, just to pick up on some of Alistair's points about trying to bring different interests together. Have you noticed that there is an evolving of that maybe intermediate space where resources, expertise, and a kind of speculative curiosity is being set up as the maybe the commerce, or maybe the goal of the non-profit, or
we had a really nice workshop a few weeks ago called KI on the couch, AI on the couch, and it was basically the premise was that we proposed was if you have an artificial intelligence, could you then also have an artificial subconscious? And essentially, it was a workshop for anybody to come and play with the technology. But what was really interesting was we had families with like 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds, all the way up to people in their 70s. We had school kids, university students, researchers, and like people from Audi who were doing who were working on automotive, self-driving cars. People from industry, all coming together in the same space, and it was actually really beautiful to see everybody sharing and exchanging notes on actually very level playing field. Although you had enormous disparities in expertise, but this will to share was actually really positive.
I was talking to a friend of mine who only trained as an artist once he'd trained as a doctor, and because his family said you better get a proper job first, right? And but he does very well as a kind of freelance physician, medic. But recently he was saying, I'm using this AI to get all my patient reports done, right? I said, this doesn't sound right. This doesn't sound ethical. And he said, no, the boring bit is having to write them, right? The real important bit is getting the data right, making sure that I'm right about what's going on in the results that my patients are presenting. When we test, we take on data points from various tests. And then the great assistance to me is that the AI is able just to write things which are rational, reasonable, and sensible summaries of what I've given it, right, in plain English, and I will check it and I will polish it. So, and then this is, reduce my workload by like 3/4, he says, when it comes to writing these. So the interesting thing there is, good data and useful data, of course. In medicine, we can see that there's some great tool-like applications where these technologies can go in a way which is completely inhuman, right? Mm-hmm. At the level of, but completely tied to a human goal, right? I'm very interested in how you have used, what your motivations are to use what sounds very boring, like weather statistics, mm-hmm. right? Okay, right. But also the archive, but also the museum, but also the library. And I'm curious to hear you say a little bit more about what you expect us to, the unknown bit mm-hmm. That comes back through the artwork for us human audiences, right? Because that's finally, it seems we're still coming back to us as an audience. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's also interesting that, we can feel a little bit sort of awestruck by being faced with the immensity of all the data in the universe, all the data in the internet. and maybe feel quite sort of, marginal to it all. So I'm just curious to kind of tease out this question of, like, well, where do we sit then, or where do we stand as an audience, as an artist relating to an audience? Because you say 3 million people saw the MoMA show. So what is your intuition? I wouldn't call it goal, but what's the intuition to kind of discover artworks that are for audiences, and what is the value in that for you?
I think one thing, and at least one project that in our practice that I think we were super grateful, 2016 again, thanks to Vasif Kortun of SALT Archives in Istanbul. He allowed us to use 1.7 million, maybe we can show archive dreaming video, because I think you were also able to...
Yeah, I saw it, and also it connects with how we're working now as well with archives,
So this piece to me is a very special, first of all, even I am a very digital artist, I have a huge respect and love for books, libraries, and physically experiencing knowledge. I think libraries are so important where information turns into knowledge. And I felt this like a very spiritual place for, AI or humanity in general. So we just take this very first attempt. As far as I know, it's the first public artwork using real-time AI. And what was the idea is like inspired by the way Borges, of course, Library of Babel, and we just very inspired the idea of what happens if we witness a machine in front of a human learns from all these millions of possibilities. Because what I felt that when I go to a library or a place where things are linear or needs a physical context, what happens, we see everything that exists in that library. Like, can we reconstruct the information of that space? And can we learn in a different way? And of course, in a place where we learn what is real, and if that machine can dream or hallucinate, who will define what is real? So 8 years ago, that was a speculation. And it was a fascinating experiment because I have a huge, again, respect to archives. And right now, all these current large language models are trying to give a meaning to our humanities archives. And I also believe that there are these infinite possibilities when you think about what that knowledge can create. That was our homage to the libraries in the world. And again, 8 years ago, it feels like 80 years right now with AI, but it's like a very early machine hallucinations where I thought that, again, if we have this possibility of AI dreaming or hallucinating, that was a very thought-provoking experience.
But it's also actually it's a really wonderful way to learn, because also there's the non-hallucinatory mode for it, where you can basically, in the VR, for example, you can fly through the archive and pick things out and read them, and it as a way to gain knowledge in a different way for people who don't want to read through books and books and books. It actually has huge potential, and we're finding this now. So, for example, ZKM archives and collections. We have terabytes of data of films, videos, archives, documents, handwritten print, websites, pure data. Just incomprehensible amounts of data, and that's, compared to a library, it's nothing. But what we're finding is we can now use AI to basically read the archive. And this then channels through kind of more public domains like Kafka, and you can channel into the public space, and people can now start to search and read and use archives in a way they never have before. And that you can search by image, by text. You can you can start to read handwritten diagrams by artists. We have this project with Harold Bode, who's kind of one of the inventors of the synthesizer, and we're now using these technologies to read his circuit diagrams and then interpret them for a public audience as well. So it has huge potential.
Okay, so that's knowledge. That's a good thing, right? The difference between data and knowledge is a big deal. The difference between an archive which just sits there looking pretty, I love books. You love books. We all love books. But there's those jokes about, how many of the books on your shelves have you actually read, and actually, more pertinently, how many of the books on my shelves have I read but have forgotten? There is this kind of thing where, even though you think you've learnt, you're always having to go back and remake and remake. Now, the idea of, but that's all to do with a really good thing that we understand to be the value of knowledge. I'm going to ask a sort of Philistine question, which is, yes, but is it art, right? Is it knowledge or is it art? Or is it a tool? or is it some kind of other form of spectatorship? Because I think it's really interesting what you do, that a lot of the criticism sometimes it's just a spectacle, right? So you have to take this kind of flack from from critics, But I think the point is that the point is being missed, which is that this is seeing things that you would not see in a form that you have not seen before, right? If I may paraphrase it like that.
Absolutely, I think. So first of all, I mean, since I guess Namjoon Paik, artists who have been practicing in the video domain and time-based domain, and this is always a recurring the pattern. But I think what here we are witnessing, at least artists practicing with machine intelligence, it is yes, it is art, but it's kind of there's this more on top of it. I think. I feel like there's more than art because we are witnessing something profoundly different in the human history. So it's not just another algorithm or another machine in the corner dreaming, bless you, but it's more about being human in the age of machine intelligence. And I think it's so new and it's so fresh. What is happening to us is so remarkably will be remembered in the next centuries that even the art question will be so minimal because it will change anything and everything. So artists practicing in this medium, creating a video, image, text, sounds, whatever created, I think it's art. I don't think it's anymore that question. It's really profoundly which one is impacting the society, which one is creating a question in the mind of the audience. Is touching a mind and a soul is possible? Is it possible to really move a human being by looking at machine possible dreams? There's so many questions that is beyond just, I think, what is that function of the experience in life. In my humble view, we are entering in the age of co-creation with machines and humans, right? And it's very clearly distributed unequally, again, anywhere and everywhere. So artists are the alarm mechanism of humanity. In our practice, in every single exhibition we did with AI, we dedicated literally a wall, sometimes bigger than the artworks, to be sure that we have the process of the work, where data comes from, which algorithms we use and why. And I know that in the art history, whenever things are demystified, there may be this question. But I think anyone touching AI has yes, AI brings possibilities, but comes with responsibilities. So for me, that process wall we use always brings that safe and secure context. And I do believe later than people feel understanding, grounding their self, okay, that's the data, that's the algorithm. Okay, so where is human imagination, right? Then dreams and hallucinations and so forth may happen, deep or surface level question may happen. But I think this whole thing is a part of, I think, practice. From the very first data point to the fine tuning, to the practicing, communicating, I don't believe they are like this, they're all connected right now.
But I also find what's very exciting is it starts to break our idea of art.
Yes.
Itself. I mean, the idea of something being art or not is a relatively recent human culture. It's about 250 years old compared to 40,000 years of human history. And what I find with this co-curation, this complete hybridization, it reverts art back to what I think art is, which is really as a process. It's not where, it's easy to say that's art, that's not, you're an artist, you're not an artist. The world doesn't work like that in reality. Yeah. Things are art to a different degree.
Yes.
And I think what's beautiful about this, the complexity of this technology is it allows complexity. And it allows us to create a culture of complexity that embraces it and says, well, maybe it's a kind of art, or maybe it's a little bit art here, and maybe it's more like techne here. It doesn't matter. What's important is that we are enabling creative processes, and we now have the tools to do things we couldn't do before.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm being a little bit mischievous by saying, is there a limit? Because, of course, the whole point about art is that the word has expanded and expanded and expanded to cover more and more things once artists have made the case for them being legitimate, right? And, photography. I was at the Tate show of the history of women artists, It's all painting. It's painting. It's painting. It's painting. Of course, and female artists are excluded from the academy and stopped from being good painters, and all kinds of constraints. And then there's this kind of peculiar little moment which is a room, it's quite a small room devoted to photography. And because there were no controls over photography, because the artists in the academy, the men, didn't care very much about this new technology, right? Suddenly, women are using it, as much as they can to produce things completely fresh and completely different. So, of course, and then, of course, nobody has a problem with photography being art anymore, because we understand that there are values that are invested in the way in which photography can work, that give it a depth and a complexity, So that is not just prosaic or everyday. So this is the interesting thing. It's like to try and dig into the moment where we can say that there is something valuably new that is somehow, that has a positive ethics to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also what you can do in terms of ethics as well, which is very interesting with this, is that it dissolves away the sanctity of the human.
Okay.
That kind of human-centered worldview. I know that there's a lot. It's slightly troubling. There's a lot of talk at the moment. When everyone says human now, there's like this Tourette's reaction. You go, and the non-human. But there is something happening where we're starting to see the world differently through this. That are there other intelligences?
Yeah.
And it actually starts to create empathy with the natural environment,
Yep.
and then you can start to ask questions like, okay, maybe animals also make art, maybe plants also make art, maybe machines also make art, and
Yes.
this is not a problem. I think it's interesting and fascinating. And in fact, I'm really keen as I can to do a show for robots by robots, where no humans are allowed in, just almost as a thought experiment, to see what kind of cultural experiences can we make, and even if that's a thought experiment, and it's kind of a bit funny, but what would it tell us about our own?
But will it involve feedback questionnaires?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
From the
and workshops.
I think it's a moment to I can see hands going. I'm going, come on then, where are the Q&As? I think we have a microphone, do we? Is there a microphone for audience to say things into? Is it? Yeah, can we grab that?
Thank you. This is extremely inspiring, and I've been following AI since 2015 when I watched AlphaGo, and when this Korean master, at one point he realized he wasn't losing to AlphaGo, he was losing to himself. My dad was scientist, so I have been following. I have been through different phases. I joined this AI for Women thing. At the beginning, I was scared, and now I'm extremely excited about AI. So there's so many things I want to talk, but starting from I feel not only AI is questioning what is art. To me, I feel it's questioning what is consciousness, what is intelligence, what is human, what we want to become. So this library archive thing, for me, I find this. To me, I feel we are going through a time where before we say knowledge is power, and I feel in the future consciousness is power. Because, for example, this library, I grew up a lot reading. Sometimes I go to a library, I'm so scared because I can't stay there forever. And with AI, with internet, this has become even more a problem. And I also realize, because knowledge and intellect and intelligence, knowledge and consciousness, these are very different things. So my mind has been always too overly stimulated. So I kind of feel actually I need to, we're touching about something. So to me personally, I feel I actually have to unlearn, and I have to I'm at the point I have to get rid of not a lot of knowledge in order to touch that place that's intelligence and consciousness. So this is first thing I strongly feel. And I have so many thoughts.
Okay, let's because I think the point about where it leads. I mean, this is a very big issue about what we mean by consciousness, how we relate it to the difference between the human and everything else, and we can certainly reflect on that.
It does raise a little question, which is another big topic, maybe. But in a way, there is potential about it having because it gives everybody access to intelligence. We could see a redistribution of intelligence among the population, and in terms of power in our kind of economies and our ecologies. That if you imagine if people who were normally not regarded as intelligent or not having power, if they can use these tools to give them to empower themselves, that could have enormous consequences as well.
OpenAI founder Sam, he on a Twitter 2022, when he was asked, "What do you know about AI we do not know?" one of his answer was, "The atom is Braham." So I miss Nan Junpei. I feel if he was alive, I would ask him so many questions. He was so advanced. He already know, like many others, like Krishnamurti, they know in the 80s, in the future, AI will replace us. So the question is, what is human? So like Nan Junpei, his art is deeply based on Buddhism, which believe everything has a soul, even the machine. So these are the question opens up something huge.
But one response very quickly about consciousness. Anil Seth, a neuroscientist, says that consciousness is a controlled hallucination. I think it's a fascinating framing when you think about AI hallucinations. By the way, if you're interested to have a look, fascinating person, speculate about the context of consciousness. But I want to say something because you mentioned super important. If you look at all the large language models, they are completely egocentric, human-centric expectations, and they are trying to mimic human reasoning, human intelligence. But we forgot something that is the most important thing we have, and the most likely intelligent thing we have, called nature. And I thought that there's so fascinating to, yes, we have amazing intelligence across the world that can do 200 million protein foldings and so forth. But what happened to nature? So if you use all these AI models that are like billions of trillions of tokens or whatever, they don't even know, say, how many birds exist in Amazonia. They don't even know how many flora, fauna, fungi exist in Amazonia. So maybe complete the perspective, but you mentioned a robotic context, and it's very important to think that this AI process cannot be only about human itself. Humanity is beyond just the humans, right? And I think maybe there's a model about consciousness, maybe there's a model about nature, and I think everything exists. I think in our reality can be a reflection.
Can we take a couple of questions? Was a lady here and a lady in the middle here, so we'll come round. I'll come round to you.
Hi, my name is Johanna Zuleta, and my, concern or question to you all is about the balance. Because for sure, I believe as a new medium, it's important to explore, but at the same time, the problem that I see with these new mediums, and particularly tech, has such a power to override that then it replaces everything else in a generation. For example, I'm a big proponent of bringing back handwriting as a way to rehumanize us. And when email came out, nobody questions, and I'm not questioning the importance of writing an email that arrives to everyone in the world in a second. But what happened in 20 years, we have no longer handwriting. And Marshall McLuhan said it, in the 80s, the medium is the message. So what happens to a generation, and this is replacing culture, that does not handwrite, who has no love letters, who sends no thank you notes, and who has no moments of reflection. So I love this, and also when you bring that into perspective also in the aspects of creation, but how do you think we can rebalance this with the things that we're losing in our values that also need to keep hand in hand and in check while we create with this and just run wild with it without keeping those values in check?
Thank you very much. Hold your responses because we'll take another question and then we can bundle them together.
Hi, I'm Kristina Bodrasic, and I'm researching the influence of creatively used or intended AI on technology openness, especially in business contexts. So I'm very curious about the paper that's going to be published in 2 weeks. How important is it for you to research the human being? Are you researching the after effects as well of interacting with your arts? And mini second question, in your last newsletter, you had announced projects with the Yawanawa tribe in Brazil. So they had living archives. How are you dealing with living archives?
Beautiful.
Okay, so several kind of, any one more person that we might take a question from? No? So there's kind of two different things going on there. One is an anxiety about the loss of, say, the tactile, the haptic, that's relationship to embodied. Because this is another thing, right? The material and the embodied world that we live in seems to be under a lot of pressure from us just ending up living in a screen all the time, right?
But I mean, I see this as a continuation of part of a continuum of technology as well. You know, a pencil is a technology; it's a tool, and there's a long equivalent history of every time a technology, a tool is developed, that there's a counter to it, that there's a counter reaction, and I think that will always happen. I mean, I was talking. We have a whole team of software engineers in ZKM who do all the. We do the show at the moment, which is all our flatware from the collection, paintings, which is interpreted by AI. So it basically misreads the paintings to the public and creates new labels that give a different story of what the painting is. And they were coding all this. And it was a load of work before the show. And they're all going, I really want to do pottery. I really want to, I've been sat here for 2 weeks and I really want to go and make a pot on a, So I think that there's always that. And I think sometimes these technologies accentuate the other forms. But on a bigger scale, I think, for me, that's why I think the role of the public institution is so important, because it's a space where we talk and we calibrate and we bring these different worlds together in order to have these discussions to make sure that those principles that we hold dear to our hearts are not lost. But it also reminded me of there's a project by Robot Lab, who Refik, that you work with as well, where basically the robots are handwriting the Bible. And they are. I mean, of course, the Bibles used to be handwritten. That's how they were distributed, and then and then it became mechanized, and now it came full circle, and you have the robots handwriting the Bible. So it's a nice project for you.
Okay. Yes, Refik.
Maybe it's actually very inspiring two questions, because what you mentioned is kind of not so far from what you mentioned, but in a very different context. Your Yawanawa family, me and my partner Efsun, we have been more than 8 years researching ancestral wisdom. So it's not necessarily just because of Yawanawa, but we have a huge respect and love for what has been also somehow kept out from society. And as in love with nature, I just don't think that it's fair to just think nature as data point. It's so felt not honest to think this image, sound, text just make nature itself. So we profoundly deep dive into the nature itself and ask the question, what does it mean to be really living in the nature? Because our life in concrete jungles or established societies, just hiking on a park or in a beautiful landscape is not necessarily living in the nature. Beautiful to have nature. But we just work very closely with Yawanawa family, and but not another project. It's a very spiritual, very well connected, and deeply understanding them was the first what we learned. And then what we learned from them is so much: the respect to their culture, how they preserve information in the age of AI, how they have the wisdom of life in the nature, how they see nature. Like, for example, we ask for them, what does AI means to you? We got this shocked in as a humanity. And they say, for us, nature is AI. We don't get shocked. By the way, this tribe is not like there was a funny Twitter post about Starlink, and that there is a wisdom in the forest. There's a wisdom in the spiritual leaders. They know how to and when to introduce technology. They are so powerful people that are aware of what we have and what they don't have, right? But what I had a huge respect and love to them was they show us the way of learning, the way of preserving their culture, and how they preserve memory, in the age of cloud computing and trillions of tokens, and how only 37 people left use their language. So they teach us so much. For example, we're creating an AI model called Large Nature Model, dedicated to nature, and hopefully will be open source. The idea was inspired from them, because we learned that what does it mean to live in the forest through them. And then additionally, we learned that when it comes to truly supporting people's existence, for example, there's only 37 people talking about their language, and now we are helping them to preserve their language by AI in an open source that they can also introduce to other tribes in the region. So one day, if they want to use LLMs, they won't feel like outlied from the society, right? So I think that AI has profound ways of using that we couldn't solve some problems before. And lastly, by using generative AI, by the way, only 13 paintings they could able to create. Young Yavanava artists painting by their own ways of kınız, which they are graphical representation of their culture. They create 13 paintings, and we basically asked the chief, Nishiwaka, and his creative partner and life, what was their dream? Like, what could be there? And their dream was to have a museum, have a school, and a village. So we took that dream of them, bring the technology back to them, and raise enough money to make their first museum and school and their village. So what I would like to say as an answer, there's a way to use AI and ancestral wisdom respectfully to represent how to co-create in the age of AI. So it's possible.
And it is nature.
Yeah.
It's all nature.
Yeah.
Our consciousness as it exists created this idea of it not being nature.
That's okay. Quite big things going on there. Trying to process them. I may need some more computing capacity. I don't know if I can plug that in at the moment. I think that's probably as much as we have time for, which I'm sorry for, because some of these ideas we're just getting to grips with are quite exciting, and I want to think more about co-creation very carefully and from now on. But I guess we should draw it to a close and thank you for being such a welcoming audience. Thank you to Zurich Art Weekend for making this happen. And thank you, of course, to our speakers, Refik and Alistair. So thank you all.
Fascinating.
Thank you.
So happy to. Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.